Good morning, Bore da, and thank you for joining the National Lottery Communities Fund Policy Breakfast, looking at the impact of COVID on rural communities today. I'm Ruth Bates, I'm the Interim Director for Wales, and I'll be chairing the session. This topic is close to my heart because I've been brought up on a farm just outside a rural town called Llanfaircyfeinion in Sir Drefaldwyn, Wales. I continue to live there, and of course I'm working from there too now. I'm delighted we're able to hear firsthand from some amazing rural projects we funded. And indeed, over the last 5 years, the National Lottery Community Fund has awarded £259 million to over 11,500 projects in rural communities across the UK. Yes, that's quite a figure. This morning is about bringing together the learning and insights gained from these rural projects so we can explore and continue to support communities in the best possible way as the pandemic continues. Before we start, there are some housekeeping. Please can you share that you're attending this on Twitter? If you do use Twitter, use the hashtag please, which is TNLComFundEvent, or hashtag rural COVID. I think one of my colleagues is sharing that now in the chat function. Yes, thank you very much. If you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A function to do so, and I'll raise it with the panel. We'll try to get through all the questions, but I do need to let you know we won't be answering questions along the lines of, please will you give my organisation funding? If you are keen to find out more information about our funding, my colleague has added a link in the chat function. This link will include more information about our funding. Now I'd like to introduce you to the stars of the show, which is our panel members. So we have Chris Coucher, who's Head of Community Business for the Plunkett Foundation. Hi, Chris. Margaret Sutherland from the South Denbighshire Community Partnership. Jenny Irvine from the Ark Healthy Living Centre in Northern Ireland. And Dougie Patterson from Berkshire Housing Association in Scotland. Also, we do have Donna joining us, but in a pre-recorded short interview, and she's from the Little Green Bus based in Ribble Valley, Lancashire. Thank you all. Now I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to talk about the Plunkett Foundation's support and that interconnection between businesses and their communities, which we've seen thrive through the pandemic. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks ever so much, Ruth. Good morning, everybody. For those that aren't aware, my name is Chris Couch. I'm the Head of Community Business at Plunkett Foundation, and Plunkett is a UK-wide charity. We've been operating for over 100 years and predominantly work to support community-owned businesses of all forms. And although our reputation may be most commonly associated with community-owned shops and community-owned pubs, if it's a business or a service that lends itself to community ownership, Plunkett will have some form of advice and support that we are able to offer. For the context of this presentation, I just thought it'd be useful to say that community businesses might, in other parts of the UK, also be known commonly as community and social enterprises, community cooperatives, and come in a variety of forms. If I can ask you to change the slide, please. So, our usual approach in more normal times, if we can think back that far, was to offer advice and support to groups on a kind of 1 to 5 day packages, where we use advisors who are self-employed across the UK to offer that face-to-face, one-to-one contact and learning. With National Lottery Community Fund support in 2020, we flexed that approach. We looked at new ways of making sure that we were proactive and reactive to a pandemic situation where businesses were facing a whole host of different situations and experiences. And we wanted to make sure that where normally our funding may restrict us from the geographies we work in or through the forms of businesses that we support, we were able to utilise this support from the National Lottery Community Fund to make sure that we were ready and available to support all forms of business last year. If I can ask you to change the slide, please, A. So, what was the main asks? I mean, we were getting phone calls, emails, and conversations on our Facebook threads that were asking about clear information and guidance. It became almost a daily occurrence that there would be a briefing And then there would be questions the next day as to what that actually meant for a community-owned business. Obviously, like the main population, there was huge impact on workforce with shielding advice and furloughing, meaning that customer base and also staffing for these businesses were affected. The whole operation obviously changed in different ways, with shops seeing a huge increase in custom, pubs seeing prolonged and enforced periods of closure, and community woodlands and other small social enterprises losing out on contracted work that they were going to run throughout last year. And so there was considerations needed about the short term. How would we cash flow these coming months? How long was this pandemic going to go on for? And how could we make sure that we were reprofiling our business plans? All of these were areas of support that Plunkett was looking to provide advice and guidance in relation to, but at the same time trying to promote an ethos of peer learning where people were sharing their ideas all the way through. Please change the slide, please, eh? So, adapting to the circumstance, again, nothing new, and people will be familiar that right across the whole UK, there was interconnectivity taking place left, right and centre. You know, these community businesses were already serving a customer base, but more than ever in 2020, we saw them connecting with other small local charities, parish and community councils, good neighbour schemes, the village and community buildings, and making sure that their offer was reflective and responsive to community needs. Above all else, they maintained their social purpose. And whether that was bringing people together online, we saw pub quizzes and actually home working clubs. We even saw one pub doing bedtime stories, or actually when things were relaxed last summer, facilitating face-to-face events. It was still a dedication to serve and bring people together. We saw last year for the first time really small independent shops replicating the supermarket offer. You know, we saw online and food ordering, we saw home deliveries, and amazingly, new businesses were opening last year against the backdrop of the pandemic. 12 new community shops, which were helped and supported through the funding that we were able to access from the National Lottery Community Fund, opened, and a further 10 community-owned pubs. And the pipeline continues to be strong. Obviously, for some, there was a positive story, but there was the negativity that for some of the forms of businesses that Plunkett works with, they were just not eligible for the government-backed grants or loans, and that actually they were fearful of how their finances were going to be managed over the course of the pandemic, reiterating that point, how long would it go on for? So there was a need to think about other forms of funding, applications to small trusts or fundraising activities in their local community. Innovation was rife throughout. If I can ask you to change the slide, please. So people, at the heart of all these projects, there's a huge bank of volunteers. You know, even if there are paid for staff working as front of house, behind the scenes, there are a huge number of people giving their time for free. Now, bearing in mind that individuals had their own circumstances, whether they had been furloughed from their professional work or had just changed circumstance themselves in relation to the pandemic, the fact that they were committed and still offering their support to these community-owned businesses was remarkable. The next generation stepped up. You know, volunteering, you know, we've been worried about where does the next generation come from over the last few years. In 2020, that wasn't the case. People stepped forward. They came and did a myriad of jobs. Some were doing the home deliveries. Some were doing the driving to cash and carry to go and do mass collections to make sure that the supply chain was kept going. Some tapped into new local supply. They worked with producers, farmers, and just thought about new products that could be sold within that community. The rejuvenated support didn't just come in the form of volunteers, though. The customer base for all of these community businesses was swollen. They got in, they came forward, they showed their support, and that has turned itself into new members and new investors for these businesses. And Ada, if I could just ask you to put on the last slide. Against the backdrop of such negativity, you know, Plunkett is taking the inspiration of these community businesses that we are so lucky to be able to work with and thinking about opportunities for the future. I think the relocalization of supply, customer base and support for businesses will be paramount. We know that they can create employment and training and volunteering opportunities. We've seen innovation around digital technologies for the first time in a generation, and hopefully that will continue to swell. And we know that through the provision of small and local services, these enterprises can have a positive environmental impact through reducing people's travel and providing goods and services on their doorstep. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We'll move on now, please, to Margaret, who's going to say more about her work with South Denbighshire Community Partnership. Now, your project was one of the successful projects to be funded with National Lottery's rural programme. So looking forward to hearing more. Thanks, Margaret.
Good morning, everybody. Have you got my presentation, please? Thank you. Okay, so just to give you an idea of where we are in beautiful Wales, we're in the north of Wales, and we're in the county of Denbighshire, and we're right on the edge of the county of Denbighshire, so we are classed as deeply rural. And the picture on the left gives you an idea of our landscape, what we see every day when we look out the office window. Thank you. Next slide, please, So yes, I'm Margaret Sutherland, Chief Officer. South Denbighshire Community Partnership has a population of 5,000 people across 8 villages, but it's approximately 100 square miles that we have to cover because of we are a rural community. We're funded by the National Lottery Community Fund to reduce isolation, reduce rural poverty, and improve access to services. That's what we do. That's what we're about. Just to give you an idea on a perspective on our rurality, our nearest hospital is 23 miles away. So you don't have to be good at maths to know that's a 46-mile round trip. Our nearest supermarket is 10 miles away. Further complicated by the fact that some of our villages have no bus services at all. Where they do, they might have a bus service for a couple of days a week, but it's one bus out in the morning, one bus back in the evening. So obviously accessing services was already a challenge. We're a staffing team of about 5.5, and we've got approximately about 40 volunteers. So that gives you an idea of where we are and our community. Next slide, please, So this was life as we knew it before COVID. It was really lovely, actually. We were, rocking it down here in Corwin, doing lots of good stuff, lots of volunteers. And then suddenly that all had to change. So next slide, please. Okay, so how did we respond? So the first thing we realised was that we needed additional expertise in the organisation, particularly around clinical expertise and education expertise, with the children all being at home, needing to be homeschooled, poor internet access and so on. And then, of course, health and safety took on a whole new life of its own. And we all very quickly became very adept at risk assessing and PPE and hand sanitising. In terms of the centre, we were based in the centre, and we had to establish a remote working system very, very quickly. That we were able to do, using IT, setting up new online payment systems. We were very concerned about our elderly residents handing over money to people. We were also very concerned because if you remember back in the early days, it could be spread on paper and all kinds of things. And we were very much concerned that scammers and con artists are very quick at mobilising themselves into taking advantage of situations like this. So that was very high up in our priority. I'm very, very happy to say that we received a phone call from the National Lottery. I think it was on the morning of day 2 of lockdown. They offered us full support, said, don't worry, do what you need to do, and we will continue to fund you while you do it. That was a massive relief because that was one thing we didn't have to worry about. And that left us able to concentrate on the community and the community needs. Safeguarding I've already mentioned. Some things that we had in place stood us very well. like, for example, the fact that we're all in uniform, we all have badges, we all have our vehicles branded, so that any of the people we went to see, if we knocked on their door, they knew who we were, where we were from, and you know that we could be trusted. Yeah. Obviously, Chris mentioned before, governance, etc., still has to go on. So if you think sort of 10 months ago, people were going online platforms, you know, meetings online, but now it's become a norm, hasn't it? So we've been able to continue. Our trustees, as has everybody else, have been amazing and risen to the challenge. So that's how we organised ourselves to do what we needed to do. Next slide, please, Okay. As with everything, it worked because of teamwork. Yeah. Amazing volunteers, staff, people who were prepared, as we are used to in this sector, to go above and beyond. So without them, it wouldn't have happened. Next one, please, Okay, so far, we were able to do this from day one, which we were very pleased about. From day one of lockdown, we were already geared up and ready to respond. We did a leaflet drop to every household in the catchment area, which is no mean feat, over 100 square miles, with many remote locations. But we were concerned that people would fall through the cracks. And that the more remote they were, the more likely they were to be not connected or able to access help. Within about 3 days, 265 people had registered with us for support, people who were shielding or vulnerable. And in the main lockdown, we carried out over 4,000 responses, whether that be Meals on Wheels, food bank deliveries, prescription deliveries, dial-a-ride to medical appointments. We had previously organised a weekly shopping trip to the local supermarket via minibus. Obviously that had to stop. So what we did was we took to, it took 3 days and 3 members of staff, but we would ring everybody, collate their shopping orders, go out and purchase it, and then distribute it. So that was a mammoth task, but again, we did it, we overcame, yeah. Not so much in the early days because of, you know, concerns about how it was transmitted. But when we felt it was safe to do, we had a lending library, we distributed art packs, we did online cooking videos, we took Christmas hampers. One of the things that was a lifeline to a lot of people was our telephone befriending service, yeah. That was key to a lot of people who lived on their own and were isolated. Can we have the next slide, please, Okay. So a large part of our work, we work in partnership with Citizens Advice in Denbighshire, and I noticed there was a comment, I think it was Citizens Advice in York, said that they were looking at a rural outreach project, and they may want to speak to their colleagues in our Denbighshire. We've had this partnership in place for 2 years, but during this pandemic period, just in that period alone, we've been able to help members of the local community access benefits to which they're entitled. A new client group, if you like, that emerged was the self-employed. Right at the beginning, that was, you know, a major concern for a lot of self-employed people. We were able to help people renegotiate their debt. As a result of the work that was done, we raised people out of income poverty, and we raised people out of fuel poverty as well. So although we had to go remote with the service, we were still effective and still on the ground. A very sort of key part of our provision. Next slide, please, Okay, these are just some of the things that helped us do what we needed to do. in the beginning, there was a temptation for, 50,000 opinions of what could and couldn't be done. Lots of knee-jerk, instant, fearful, all kinds of reactions, as you would expect, came into play. That creates a lot of noise, yeah. So we realised we had to sort of get a grip on the noise and, have one clear voice. That was the focal point for communication of what we were going to do and when we were going to do it. We worked very well with stakeholders, people we already had relationships with, like the medical centre, the pharmacist, the police, even the fire service referred somebody to us that they'd attended a house fire. So it was letting people know we were here and, having systems in place to deal with those inquiries. I can't cope if I don't have a plan. If I've got a plan, I'm fine. Have a plan and a plan B, that's fine, But we just felt that was important. Although we've got staff, we all work different days, different times, and some were at home. And so it was very important that people understood where they were up to on their working days and what they needed to do. We also said it's not a time to cut corners. Yeah, you've got to still equip and train your volunteers. A lot of our volunteers were in the shielding and vulnerable category. So we had to bring on a lot of new volunteers and there was no shortages of offers. But we thought we can't just cut corners, we need to make sure that they've been trained to keep themselves safe and so on. And then we decided to concentrate on what we could do and stop worrying about what we couldn't do any longer. And that was a great mindset change as well. Yeah. We had to accept we were in this for the long run and, what can we do? I think this pandemic has shown how essential the third sector is. Yeah. It's different for everybody in every community. Yes, our council were available and so on and so forth, but we were in South Denbighshire, if you needed some shopping, unless your neighbour could do it for you, you needed your prescription and so on, we were your port of call. So we needed to be responsive, we needed to get organised so that people could isolate. They didn't have to expose themselves to risk because they had no choice. Next slide, please, eh? Okay, so what were the challenges? Yeah, and I'm sure, other people, I think Chris made reference to it, the digital divide, yeah, not just in terms of our client group and the ability of some of them to use digital equipment, but also our digital infrastructure, which is very, very poor. My speed at home is 3 Mbs, and that's only when the kids are in bed, with all the children at home all day, every day. It was challenging, shall we say. And the same is for many of our rural community. It's not just about being able to use the equipment, but you've also got to be able to afford the internet and internet access. And even then, it might not be a reliable service. The other thing we said is we cannot be all things to all people. We know what we do. We know what we do well. And we should stick to that. And what we should do is refer things to other agencies, other organisations that were better equipped to deal with it. One of the biggest and longest lasting effects, it's the same everywhere, the effects on people's mental health, the lack of services and provision in the south of Denbighshire for mental health services has been all the more keenly noticed during the pandemic, and going forward is a key priority for us to work on this and try and address it. Could I have the next slide, please? Hey. Okay, so what's the positives, yeah? What's the positives out of this? We know now we can establish a remote working service in hours. Yeah. The improved systems and procedures that we had to put in place will benefit us far beyond the pandemic. We've all learned, we've all benefited, we've all grown from the experience. We did a lot of training with volunteers and staff on mental health self-care, mental health first aid for the community. Our volunteers who deliver have an understanding of how to spot signs that somebody might be deteriorating, might need a friendly phone call or, you know, some other help or assistance. We owe an enormous thanks to the staff, the volunteers and the communities for supporting each other through the pandemic. It was a close community. It's even closer now, you know. But we found new ways of reacting to help people. We found new ways of meeting our agenda to reduce isolation, reduce poverty and improve access. We kept in mind that we needed to enable people to do those things that contribute to health and well-being, the opportunity to connect, to learn and so on. And I think we did that. We would have liked to have been able to do more about connecting, but, you know, we did what we could when we could. And I think it's my last slide now, eh? Is it? Yeah. So that was our experience, yeah. As rural communities, we have similar challenges, but we also have specific challenges. I'm grateful to the National Lottery for giving us this opportunity. Already I shall be contacting the Plunkett Foundation. So I'm very excited to hear and learn from other people, you know, that we can take as well and go forward. So thank you very much. And diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Margaret. That was really insightful. There's so much in there that we can pick out on, especially, as you're saying, the role that volunteers, you know, charities, local groups have played. And interestingly, the National Lottery Fund did undertake some community research, asked over 7,000 people, you know, what's important to them and what are the learnings through the pandemic. And one of the key things that came out of that is that they feel that local community groups and charities deserve more recognition for the role they've played through the pandemic. So exactly as you were saying, what's been able to take place is thanks to volunteers and the work that you're leading. And I love the idea that you need a plan. Who doesn't need a plan? I know we have got a question actually in the panel, in the chat actually, and I'm just going to ask it now to you, Margaret, before moving on to you, Jenny. And it's one from Beverly. Thank you, Beverly Davis. She's saying, I'd be interested to hear how you're planning to emerge from the lockdown and what projects you have planned.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of temporary emergings, you know, with fire breaks and so on and so forth. I in my mind now, with the information that's available to us, I don't think we're going to be able to safely reintroduce a lot of our centre-based activities for some considerable time. Yeah. So I'm now looking and thinking about our over 80s and our over 70s have all had their injections now. The weather's getting better, and I'm thinking that one of the things we can do is take people out for a change of scenery. When we were taking people to the GP for their vaccinations, it literally had been the first time they'd been out the house for 10 months. So plans going forward, mental health agenda, we're already in conversation with our hospital board about improving the services in South Denbighshire, one-to-one counselling, group sessions, and so on. We are concerned that once furlough ends and a lot of our people work seasonally, that the demand for the food bank and food parcels and so on, we like to call them community gift hampers, can I say. Our community gift hampers, we think the demand for that will grow. So we've opened a second site in Llangollen, where in partnership with another group. So I think as soon as the weather's warm enough, we're allowed to, we'll do stuff outside. We're fortunate we've got a great big field behind us. So it's do what we can, when we can. Except that we won't be going back. The old normal is gone forever. We're different. Our service use is different. The environment's different. We're looking forward to creating our new normal. And we think it's going to be even stronger because of what we've learned.
Great. Thank you, Margaret. And let's move on now then, please, to Jenny. And Jenny's going to talk about the work of the ARC Healthy Living Centre. So thank you, Jenny.
Hello. Have you got my presentation? Maybe not.
We
Never
see.
mind. It doesn't matter if it's not there. I can. Hopefully it'll come up as I speak. Just to say, it was lovely to follow you, Margaret, because I could so relate to so many of the things that you said. It really made sense, and it reflects some of our work as well. So when my presentation comes up, you'll see where we are, and I think that's actually quite important, because I'm aware today that there are people here from Scotland, Wales, England, right across the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, to really show you where we are and to explain the periphery of our location, which is probably at the minute just on the edge of Europe. So we'll show that. Also, I had a lovely picture, and I wanted to shamelessly promote the beautiful area we have. So if there are staycations, people will actually consider coming here. What did we do before and what do we do now? I'd really love to be able to show you these presentations, but they will come up at some point and they'll be available. What we focused on, sorry,
Hi,
you want to come in?
I've had a message from A. He's having problems with his computer. Now, this is the working this way, so we're trying to resolve it. He's saying he is back now. So can we, maybe if we go back to give you time, so we have that presentation, if we see there are any other questions, and then we'll come back. Jenny, we're here. Fantastic. So thank you for bearing with us.
No problem. Hey, do you want to go through and we'll show you the beautiful place that we come from? It's the next slide. Yes, you see, this is why I'm trying to shamelessly promote the area. We are very rural. Next slide, please, And
Jenny, can I just say it was so worth waiting to see that. I understand you're selling it well. Thank you.
So if you look at a map of Ireland and you see number 1, that's Fermanagh, and that's where we are, and that gives you some perspective at the minute. It's a border county. It's right on the edge of the United Kingdom, and we're probably as close to America as you can get from the United Kingdom. So we do feel, in terms of rurality, that we tick that box very much. Rurally, sparsely populated community right on the edge of the border with the south of Ireland. Next slide, please, How we started and what we're doing now. Throughout the pandemic, we really marmotized. If you're familiar with the work of Michael Marmot, that's in relation to health inequalities. We felt that the health inequalities really were exacerbated during the pandemic. So we really stuck to those principles, giving every child the best start. Our Sure Start project continued right across the whole rural geography and throughout the pandemic. And more than ever, families needed support. Even Santa zoomed in. I don't know who this is. Even Santa zoomed into the homes over Christmas. Our one-to-one support with vulnerable families continues. The next slide, please, Our childcare. Our childcare had to close initially due to the restrictions. All childcare closed. We reopened as quickly as we could. That meant we actually had to break down barriers, including walls. We broke down walls between units to create the space for the children. We adhered to all of the guidance that was required, which was really very much about infection control and safeguarding. And it meant a very different experience for the children. But nonetheless, it was absolutely essential that we could provide safe childcare, particularly for key workers and people that really didn't have choices throughout the pandemic. They had to work. And safeguarding was a real issue. When people didn't have safe childcare, children were in many cases left at home alone by themselves. So we reopened for full daycare in June, and we continue to support those children. Our child contact service, that's another issue. It's for children that are of non-resident parents, for them to come together. That again worked right through the pandemic and even over Christmas. Next slide, please, A. The creating and developing healthy and sustainable communities. We did have a telephone service that was established over 18 or 17 years ago. It was already there, and we continued to engage with lonely and isolated people, even again on Christmas Day. Our food bank had started some 3 years ago, but it had a massive increase in demand. Again, with Margaret, during the first lockdown, we're providing up to 250 people with food each week, and that was new to us. The interesting thing as well is in relation to people that were self-employed, the people that had donated to our food bank in the past were now recipients of that. So that was a massive change. And again, it was the sensitivity of that service that the family support workers that had relationships with the community weren't given charity, they were supporting with gifts of food, and it was perceived in that way. The mental health services have been very busy. Social prescribers have continued, and our community health facilitators continue to be very active. Some essential health clinics continue within our buildings, and that's with risk mitigations in place. So podiatry and substitute prescribing, for example, those clinics have continued. Next slide, please. A. The strengthening the role and impact of ill health prevention. This was hugely important. Many people didn't seek medical support or clinical advice during the pandemic, and conditions got much worse. So we're really about ensuring that the health service didn't stop just because of COVID. It was necessary. Again, our new project that we had just launched, the Rethink project, which covered the whole of Tyrone, Fermanagh and right through into Derry, which is the whole west of Northern Ireland, that had been launched, and the model had to change and change very quickly. Now, the concept was bang on. It was about resilience and trying to reduce social anxiety, to support mental health and to reduce addiction. The model was through the delivery of courses, again, with engagement with our client officers. They could quickly see that we couldn't do something that wasn't possible, and it changed to a remote model very quickly, and over 150 telephone calls per week began to happen. Now the courses are actually happening remotely, but there was, as Margaret said, we could feel that empathy and support, and that was vital, particularly early on with launching a new project. And the linkages with other providers were hugely important. We worked with the Alliance of Healthy Living Centres, we worked with Community Transport, we worked with the Department of Communities, we worked with our GP and our councils. The relationships that maybe existed but weren't as necessary in the past became very necessary to deliver during the pandemic. Next slide, please. This is really important, the healthy standards for all. We found that groups that were on the edge and somewhat excluded before became further isolated. We did a lot of work, educational support with children from the travelling community. We know health inequalities there are huge, and it was trying to ensure that those children could still engage in education. Also, in terms of our low threshold addiction services, we know that the level of alcohol consumption has increased significantly. We don't need to wait for all the NISRA statistics on that. We know that's a fact. And people that drank at heavy levels before probably moved to dependency. So it was trying to ensure that services were in place, that we weren't about preaching or teaching, but we were just there to support and help our community throughout this. Next slide, please, A. The lessons. I'm flying through this, guys, because Margaret has said so much, so I'm not going to repeat all of the issues that she discussed, but there's some things that we think were hugely important. The rural solutions to global pandemic. Local organisations can mobilise quickly to address rural need. We were already there, and the solutions needed to be rural solutions. the working from home can actually be advantageous for some rural dwellers. What we have seen in the past is people had to leave rural areas to access employment. They couldn't stay home. We could see even at the edge of the county the amount of cars that left every day, and there was some data analysis about that. All of the jobs in relation to civil service jobs, particularly in Northern Ireland, were based in Belfast. So people from rural areas could either decide to go and live there, to commute there, or simply not to apply for those posts. I think there's been a significant change now that we know it doesn't really matter where people live in terms of the work opportunities they may have. So that's certainly new. Telehealthcare has a place in serving rurally dispersed people. We had a huge problem in relation to GP services prior to this. Our rural GP practices were closing and people were very, very concerned. Throughout the pandemic, we very quickly used new ways, telephone triage, online consultations, things that we never thought possible became possible very, very quickly. And we don't want to go back from all of that. Some of that has actually worked very well for our people. The remote learning, this is important. I'm actually having a homeschooling parent. I can totally relate to Ruth. It's been a steep learning curve for me, particularly Anglo-Saxons and the Battle of Hastings. Really what I have learned throughout this pandemic has been, I don't know if I'll ever use it again, but it's certainly lodged. But remote learning could maximize the opportunities for rural schools. What has happened is our rural schools have been in decline and we've been busing all the kids into the large towns to big schools. But what we've realized from this is that smaller schools could be sustainable. They could link into larger areas for specific courses. But there is a reason, whereas prior to this, big was beautiful. Suddenly during this, we've actually realized that it wasn't that beautiful and small is pretty beautiful too. So we think that there is learning from that. The shopping local and the sustaining rural communities. Again, back to what Margaret said, the local shop that had never done telephone orders or online orders or even deliveries began to do so, and that was hugely important. Again, our local pharmacies were hugely important in relation to the delivery of services, working with volunteers right throughout the country to ensure that people had the products that they needed. And the last piece that really I want to touch on, it's back about the funders, Aidan. It was that funders that are flexible and responsive can reach the parts that other funders cannot. So the idea that, we had very few occasions, but in some occasions we had some people coming back going, well, you said you'd do this. How are you going to do this now? And we're saying, well, we can't actually do that because firstly, it's probably illegal. And secondly, that's not where the demand is. So how do we do what's necessary during a pandemic? There's lots of things that are nice, but actually probably not necessary. So how can we safely do what's absolutely necessary? And in relation to the services that we need to put out in the communities, there was, I think, a rush back to what Margaret said. At one stage, people wanted to do something and they didn't necessarily know. Again, she said about the busyness, but it's about actually being quite strategic and thinking what's needed, what's necessary. And how do we ensure that we actually adhere to the message? The message was stay at home if it's not necessary. So how do we ensure that people aren't delivering things that maybe are surplus to requirements, but making them feel good? So as an organisation, we're very acutely aware of that. And the other thing, our IT infrastructure, we quickly had to move online. So our IT and telecommunications infrastructure needed to be really, really supported. We hadn't probably invested enough in that. And no funders in the past really had come in and said, here's an upgrade to your IT system, here's some infrastructure support for that. It was all very much program based. But during the pandemic, we couldn't run programs without that infrastructure. So we had to dip into quite a bit of our reserves to put that in place. So I think that was a lesson from us, again, that we need to invest probably to deliver. And our final one was just about the issue of transformation. That's the final slide. It's possible and change is inevitable, but transformation can only be achieved through choice and effort. Do we want to go back to all of the things we did before? No, we don't. Agree with Margaret, some of the things that we did no longer fit, and the new normal is different. but it's where we are, and it's the space we'll be operating from for quite a while. So it's about being as positive as we can and translating that message to our people. And the little boy in the middle, it's just thank you, really, from the bottom of our heart for all the support that we've received, and it has made a difference. That's me.
Thank you ever so much, Jenny. That was amazing, and what you've highlighted there, clearly the challenges, but the opportunities presented to us in this new norm. And I also understand that you've been serving as a frontline nurse during this, as well as running a charity. So I think it's a big thank you to you as well. That's amazing. So yeah, big clap to you. Thank you, Jenny. Now we'll move on to Dougie, and Dougie's going to talk to us a bit about the work that you're undertaking in Scotland. So over to you, Dougie.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the beautiful county of Berwickshire. I wish I could do this outside today because it's the most beautiful winter morning, and Berwickshire is the most beautiful place. Just to give you an idea about where we are got Northumberland to the south and East Lothian to the north. And we're roughly halfway between Edinburgh and Newcastle. Berwickshire has a population of about 20,000 people, and I work for Berwickshire Housing Association. We're a registered social landlord, and we have around about 1,800 properties across Berwickshire. So we're the eastern side of the borders. If you ever come through Berwickshire, you'll come up through the A1, and the East Coast Main Line runs through the county. My theme today is going to be very much what's been talked about before, which is about partnership working. Berwickshire has got an abundance of talent, lots of great organisations, and Berwickshire Housing Association wants to tap into that as much as we can. The main project we run is, and the cornerstone of our community initiatives programme, is our Befriend project. Befriend is aimed at people over the age of 55 who are lonely and isolated. And we run that mainly through volunteers and a small team of staff. Normally, before the pandemic struck, we worked with people on a one-to-one basis. We had allocated them a volunteer. We did lots of group befriending, outings and various other things. When COVID came along, we had to change that very, very quickly. And we're so grateful, Ruth, to the Community Lottery Fund, because we were able to contact our funders and say, look, we think we need to do things differently. So we moved befriending over to mainly telephone support. And that was critical to reach people quickly and to be in contact with them on a regular basis. BHA itself, Berwickshire Housing, we also wanted to keep in touch with our tenants, because it's not just older people that are vulnerable. So we've made over 11,000 welfare calls over the course of the pandemic to our tenants. And I think we've got to know our people a lot better as a result of that. As we moved on and as we went in and out of lockdown, we had to change the way that we connected with people. One of the things we created was a lending library. And I'm delighted that Juliana from Berwickshire Association of Voluntary Services here, because we're doing things in partnership, and that's the theme of what I'm going to be talking about today. The lending library has 50 devices that we lend for a period of up to 6 months. They all have unlimited SIM cards, and it means that we can connect people. They don't have to have Wi-Fi connection. And Margaret, I sympathise with you. I've got 5 megabytes in my house, so our connections here aren't brilliant. But we also went around Berwickshire and we tested what's the best provider to connect with that. So we're able to do that. And what we found again is that older people, they are keen to use digital devices. They use things like FaceTime. They're able to do Zoom calls and connect with family and friends, and that's been a critical thing. And we're looking in the future to sustain that and work with Juliana at Babs to be able to roll that out to more villages and halls and other communities. Berwickshire is a very rural community. We have pockets of population with Eyemouth, which does the best fish and chips and ice cream in the UK, if not the world. We have Coldstream, which is a small village on the border, and we have Duns, which is kind of central within Berwickshire. But other communities are scattered across the area, and we have very limited transport, and that's the challenge that is met partly because we have a great community transport organisation, again run by Babs. The BHA itself, we have lots of areas that we want to develop into open spaces, green spaces, and Abundant Borders has 2 of our gardens. Abundant Borders, Karen's online, so she'll come back to this. We want to make sure that all our people have access to green space and community gardens. So there's lots of things going on around that, but COVID has cut through all of that, and it means that we have to do things differently. And I think, as Margaret was talking about, I think digital connection is here to stay. I can see the lending library becoming a more permanent resource. I hope it does. I hope we can expand on that. One of the things that really struck me within Berwickshire was the huge response from the community, the volunteers that stepped forward. The local authority set up a community assistance hub designed to coordinate support and make sure people weren't left without food and without supplies. That took a while to set up, but in fact, across the county, village halls and small communities already had people volunteering. So we were pushing on an open door when it came to provision like that. And I think it's the strength of this county, and indeed what both Jenny and Margaret and Chris have talked about. It's about the people that are there already who step in to help very, very quickly. And that's been something which really, the power of our community and the talent that we have out there and the willingness of people to step forward has been absolutely amazing. Befriend is only one part of what BHA is trying to do. We have a community initiatives programme, and we want to work with and do joint partnerships with lots of different projects, because again, we're a small community, we don't have a lot of services on our doorstep, so the more we have to make the most of what we have. So we have a network of like-minded organisations that can refer to each other, that can work in partnership, and we've seen that strengthen throughout the pandemic side. Going forward, it's not just about what's happened in the last few weeks or the last few months, it's about what will happen in the next few years. And again, a rural community has to be sustained, and we have to have those connections strengthened going forward, because we know that has had such an impact on our people, and our volunteers have been a huge part of that. Lessons learned. Well, we have learned that partnership is the key to success. We can't do it alone. Befriend is fantastic. It's adapted very rapidly in the circumstances. Our volunteers have been brilliant, and they've adapted to telephone support and digital enabling. But we know that we need to do more of that going forward. We've seen new structures emerge. We have a community assistance hub which coordinates support. That should continue, because we've known that brings people together virtually and maybe physically in the future, but that has been a huge way of helping to coordinate that support in a much more kind of coordinated way, and I think has done a great job in reaching people as much as we can. We need to strengthen our community even more. BHA is going to continue to run a community initiative programme. We want to support projects, especially pilot projects that can be started up, can show what they're doing and what the difference it's making, and then hopefully Ruth can then have enough evidence to put in a lottery application. That's what we would love to see. We need to invest more in community transport. We need to do a lot more cooperation around the links with all our services, including our social work departments and others. And above all, I think we need to capitalise on the talents and the resilience that our community has shown throughout the pandemic. So I think we've seen a lot of good lessons learned, a lot of things that we have not been surprised at, but I suppose we've seen the value of through all of this. I'm going to end on just a brief note around mental health and around the future. I'm really concerned about the impact of mental health on people through prolonged periods of lockdown, and not just older people or younger people, but on everybody. I get the sense at the moment that it's really wearing people out, and I'm a bit concerned about the long-term effects of that. And the second thing is, that goes back to the question that Beverly asked earlier, I think there's a job to do to almost re-enable people to go outside and venture back out into their community. I think people are frightened. I think that feeling of fear is not going to go away quickly. Fantastic that the vaccination is rolling out and we've got a programme that's going, but I think it will take time and patience and support to get people back out into their communities and to get out mixing again. And thirdly, I think that we're going to see, hopefully, a strengthened kind of approach around looking out for each other and around keeping an eye on our most vulnerable people and making sure that nobody is left alone, be it during the pandemic or at times in the future.
Thank you, Dougie. And there's some interest in what you're saying around mental health. So if I asked for you as the panel, what are the ideas that you have to support people to get back into their community life and to have that confidence to overcome what you said are the results of this long lockdown on people's mental health? So have you got some ideas that you could share about how we do get people's confidence back into community life?
I think Ruth, what we need to do is connect with people, and gradually work with them. Maybe when it's safe to do so, accompany people to go out to places, to go even down to the shop, or take them out in a car, or do something. Just gradually let people know that what they had before, it hasn't all disappeared, and that we need to reskill people and give them that confidence that they can go back and re-emerge into their community. And I think one of the strengths again that Karen from Abundant Borders is on today, what Karen's done with her community gardens and her volunteers is lots of online learning and lots of new connections as a result of that. And hopefully what that will do is relationships built up, that when it's safe to do so, when our volunteers go into the community gardens and they do a fantastic job, Karen can give an hour on all of this, is that they will go there because they've met people, they know people, and they've made those new connections, and those relationships is what will help people build up the skills and confidence to go out into the community. And thirdly, I think that again, it's about the use of our volunteers and how volunteers have stepped up without being asked and without being cajoled into doing it, to be able to accompany people. And again, those connections made during the pandemic is what I think will help with all of that going forward. Thank
you, Dougie. Chris, Jenny, do you have any further reflections around maybe community business role?
So I mean, I think picking up on Dougie's point, the first thing is going to be about communication and making it a two-way process from the word go. I mean, community businesses have having to be doing this for the last 12 months anyway. As soon as there was the announcement, people needed to still have the confidence to go into their shops. Volunteers had to have the confidence that they were going to be safe in serving customers. And I think that conversation continues. Obviously, pubs similarly have seen that conversation backwards and forwards. But I think there is obviously an element, the fact that the diversification of services and new products and new ways of serving will mean that even if there is that sort of residual nervousness, completely understandable in the early days, whatever stage we get to in that kind of post-lockdown period, we have found and seen extraordinary examples of people taking products and services to people's front door to make sure that nobody is excluded, and it makes sure that those that are vulnerable and potentially isolated are included in operations, regardless of whether they're happy to walk out and about and actually go into a shop or a pub or even use the woodland space. And I think that ethos is going to be going forward. For me, I think the real mental health importance, where we really need to put a priority, is on those volunteers that have been working flat out now for 12 months. And the danger of fatigue on them, and making sure that they feel supported, so that they're able to go about their own daily life, as well as continuing to do the remarkable thing that they are doing and serving their communities.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Jenny, clearly you've got experiences on both fronts here. What would you like to share?
I think people are nervous to go out again for good reason, the messages that we have been giving people in relation to stay at home have been very necessary. But I think we need to be very balanced in that. I have a 12-year-old as well, and I was shocked one evening by the amount of negativity on, in one break. There was the issue, don't go out in case you die, don't reverse over your child in your tractor. And there was another one, yes, that speed killed a classroom of our children. So we're sending very important messages, but in a very negative way. And I think that we'll need to change the paradigm somewhat, that the risk still exists, but how can we safely engage again? So I think that we need to look through that lens moving forward, if we're to address the issue of anxiety and really support people. It's not to dilute the issue, but it's just to, rather than have it in a very, I suppose, negative approach. It's positively, how can we overcome this to engage in a safe way again? So I just think we need to shift the lens a little bit at this point.
Thank you. And I'll move on to another question in the panel. Is from Richard Gunton, who's an ex-BBC presenter, and he's asking, what do we think is the role of of radio station for rural reach? And I wonder how important, he's asking, is radio to your community to connect and include, etc. He says. So anybody want to take that answer, please? Okay, Margaret.
Very interesting, because one of the things that I've been cogitating is, if we'd have had a local community radio, really local community radio, we could have reached those people who didn't have internet. We could have done stuff that enabled them to keep connected, and so on and so forth. And it's one of my things to think about going forward. Yeah. And it was exasperated, can I tell you, and went even further up my to-do list when I lost internet at home on Saturday and can't get it back. So that means, all communications gone. So radio, yes. And our service user group, do see radio as something that they've always had on in the background. I would like to explore community radio much further.
Great, thanks, Margaret. Now we'll move on to, this is the last panel member, but she can't be with us today, Donna can't, but she has shared her thoughts with us in a piece that she's pre-recorded. So I'm hoping our technical team will seamlessly move on to Donna Atkins, who works for the Little Green Bus, which is based in Lancashire, who's going to share her insight on what's been the trend to support people through the COVID pandemic. Are we able to move on? Yes.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Donna Atkinson, the Chief Executive of Little Green Bus. We're based in Clitheroe, and we cover the whole of the Ribble Valley, which is the borough in which we're based, which is part of East Lancashire. We commenced our services in 1992 as Ribble Valley Community Transport. It wasn't a name that tripped off the tongue very easily, and through an environmental project with local primary school children, we hit upon the name Little Green Bus, as it better depicts the area and the ethos of the organisation. We provide a variety of door-to-door transport, community transport services in the area. We have dial-a-ride weekly shopping services for people to get their essential shopping. We have trips further afield. We have group transport for local community groups, and we have a volunteer car scheme, which is used mainly for medical appointments. We have currently on our books over 900 passengers. They consist of both individuals and members of local community groups. And we currently also have 39 volunteer car and bus drivers. Absolutely wonderful individuals, salt of the earth, and often go the extra mile, if you pardon the pun, to meet the needs of our passengers. We're often likened to Fourth Emergency Service, as we provide a real lifeline for the people that we serve. Partnership working is absolutely key to the success of everything that we do, and we do believe that there's no point in being precious about the people that we serve. If we can use our resources wisely and work in partnership to better help the people that we serve, I'm more than happy to do that. And an example of which is Age UK, Crossroads, which is a local care project, Carers Link, Shop Mobility, Ribble Valley Borough Council, Lancashire County Council, because Little Green Bus is also the lead body of the Lancashire Community Transport Consortium, local general practitioners, social services, and we're very fortunate in getting funding from a variety of organisations, not least of which is the National Lottery Community Fund. If we reflect on the response to the pandemic, dreadful time for lots of people. We were, because we knew that the lockdown was going to happen in March, we were able to make some preparations, perhaps not as many as we would like to have done with hindsight. However, the first thing that we did, we actually purchased mobile phones so that all of us could work from home. There's 4 of us in the small team. that work at Little Green Bus. 2 people share the coordinator's post. They do half a week each. We have a full-time finance officer who also does some communication, and myself. And what we did was we kept in weekly contact with all the passengers, because we didn't want them to become lonely and depressed, as well as isolated because of the lockdown. Immediately, because we realised that our drivers also might become lonely and depressed, some of them live on their own, widows, widowers, we set up 2 WhatsApp groups, one for the bus drivers and one for the car drivers. Not to distinguish that they were different, it's just that the 2 groups are totally different in characteristics and makeup. And I have to say, some of the stuff that was posted onto those WhatsApp groups was hilarious and kept us sane on quite a few occasions. So the keeping in touch was the first thing that we did with the passengers. What this enabled us to do was to get much closer to the passengers. We do give the passengers as much time as is humanly possible when they ring us asking us for services, but with all the passengers and services that we provide, it's sometimes impossible to give them a vast amount of time. We were also able to establish that the age group that we cover, over 90% of our passengers are aged 87 plus. They're exceptionally resilient people. One of our car drivers, who himself is a chappie in his mid-70s, widower, his wife had sadly died of cancer on his own in the house, was getting really quite depressed and lonely himself. Got in trouble with the police by going out to a local spot to have a walk. He thought it was perfectly safe, and quite possibly was for him as an individual. But of course, with the lockdown restrictions, he was asked not to do it. So what I did, very quickly, I thought we're going to have to keep him out of trouble. We had become well versed with Keith's cakes, marvellous baker. So what I did was asked him, would he actually make 20 cakes per week? We introduced Little Green Bus Cakes for Carers, and he made the cakes, and we went and delivered them to the local GPs, hospitals, and the local care homes, and they were very gratefully received. Vital links, I mentioned the partnership links earlier, but particularly during the pandemic, the links to other services and organisations was absolutely vital to keeping in touch with people and providing necessary services. Little Green Bus actually hosts the Ribble Valley Food Bank in our second garage. We don't manage it, but we do host it, and we do work very closely with them. I very quickly drew up some procedures for them to, instead of people that were receiving food parcels to come to them, for theirs and our volunteers to actually deliver the food parcels to their homes. But that came with a set of fairly strict procedures. The Clitheroe hub also became vital. Lots of people were volunteering through that hub, and as I said, the links were absolutely vital to everything that we did. What have we learned from the pandemic, and what do we hope to do differently in the future? What adaptations are we going to put in place? When we were able to re-establish some of our services after the first lockdown, we had to make our minibuses from 15 passenger seats to 6 passenger seats because of social distancing rules, and also the passengers pay a small fare to get their weekly shopping. They were paying £4. We upped that to £5 so that they were just dropping a note in a little drop box on the bus. There was no need then for change to pass between the driver and the passengers. We also reinstated some of the trips out, and they were previously £11. We reduced them to 10, so you can see it swings and roundabouts. They didn't miss out on any money, and we were able to take them out on short trips out into the countryside, just to give them a change of scenery from looking out of their own window day in, day out. We found that the confidence levels of the passengers from being indoors for several weeks had waned to such a point that for some passengers it was really instilling confidence to come and take part in the outside world with some of those people. For the next steps for the adaptations for the future, we've actually realised that had we had credit/debit card readers, we wouldn't have had to have any kind of money passing between drivers and passengers ourselves, and we're looking at card readers for the future for both personal shopping, which we also did during the pandemic, and I do envisage that some of that will continue as not everybody will be able to come out straight away, and for fares on the buses. So again, there's no need for the drivers to carry change with them and passengers themselves. We looked at feedback from our volunteers during the pandemic, and we realised, as I mentioned earlier, that they themselves were becoming really quite lonely. Not only that, they were really missing the passengers that they took out to the hospital, to the shopping, on the trips, whatever the service it was that they were delivering. They were missing the passengers that they saw week in, week out. What we'd like to do going forward for the future, and following national, possibly Age UK befriending guidelines, we'd like to set up a befriending scheme. We were ringing the passengers. Ideally, it would make sense if the volunteer drivers themselves, with some training behind them, could become the befrienders. And then, as well as taking them out on whatever the service is in the future, they can also possibly keep in regular contact with them through the befriending scheme. We do think that this will meet the needs of two groups of people. The passengers, whilst they're on our minibuses, often report that one of the really lovely things about it is being able to speak to other people on the buses. We are aware that some passengers, and they are very small numbers, make up friendship groups whilst they're on the buses, and they keep in touch with other people from the buses on other days of the week. What I'd like to do going forward is to really encourage more social circles on the buses, so that, God forbid we ever go into this situation again, they have a wealth of people that they can contact and don't just have us to speak to, although they did say it was very pleasant. One of the other issues that the pandemic has brought up is that, particularly in the first lockdown, when the government decided that everybody over 70 should stay at home, a lot of our volunteers are themselves over 70, so of course they had to stay indoors, which meant that, particularly for the car scheme, we only had 2 drivers that were available and 3 of the bus drivers, which out of 39 drivers is not a lot to go at. So we do know that we're going to have to put a strategy in place for recruiting some slightly younger volunteers. And we're hoping to speak to local organisations about redundancy stroke early retirement plans, and perhaps featuring volunteering in the plans for going forwards for those people. One of the things that I would also like to do is to hold either one big one or a series of small passenger events, bringing the passengers out on our minibuses to local venues. We've got lots of wonderful small community halls within the Ribble Valley. Bringing them out, facing the passengers, which I think we benefit from greatly. There's nothing like seeing the faces of our passengers and actually getting from them firsthand what they would like us to do in the future. In terms of hopes and aspirations for the future, we can but hope that the passengers, once everything is finished and they're able to come out of their homes again, that they actually feel confident and safe in doing that. We have been told many times as part of our services that the one thing that instills in our passengers is confidence and safety when they're out of the house, because they know that they're being well and truly looked after by us and our drivers. Long may this continue going forwards. Independence is absolutely so important, particularly to elderly people, being able to live an independent life, which of course they can do via our services. They can go about their own business. And what they've actually said to us during the lockdowns is that whilst it's great that family members or other members of the community are happy to go and do the shopping for them, there's nothing quite like going into a supermarket or a shop and being able to choose the goods that you want to choose. So let's hope that that will continue. One of the things that has really happened during the pandemic, well, I suppose it's the last 2 points on there, the community spirit. There's been an absolute wealth of local people getting engaged in community support, and I'm really hoping that that will continue. And hopefully as a result of that, we might get more volunteers going forwards. Another thing, if you look around your own local communities, there are also lots of local people looking out for each other. Maybe because we were in lockdown and have been several times since, and people are not able to go to work like they used to do, and therefore have a little bit more time on their hands. But there's been a real wealth of people looking out for the neighbours, looking across the road. Is there an elderly person over there? Are they lonely? Might they be getting a bit depressed? Is there something that I can help them with? And that's one thing that I really, really hope continues in the future. Nice to see you all. Bye-bye.
Well, I think that worked very well. So thank you very much, Donna. And I can agree more around the point she's making around community spirit and how that has really embedded rural communities through this. Now, there is a question in the question section, and I think it's really pertinent for us all. So the question's from Sarah Bello. Thank you, Sarah. It's asking, with the drive to make so many services available online, how do we ensure that no one is excluded? I'll go round my screen as it appears. So Margaret, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, good question, and one that we've been, I think all of us are thinking about. We work with a client group that is predominantly elderly, and as I say, with the infrastructure things, it's something, as I had on my PowerPoint, one of our challenges, and it is high on my list of how we can address it, because it could have made such a difference. You know, I kept thinking, oh, we could have online bingo, we could have online poetry reading, online creative writing. I could think of so many things we could have done, but we couldn't do because of that digital divide. So I'd be interested. As I say, I'm exploring something at the moment, a community internet option. I was familiar with one where I worked previously in Manchester, and I think the Welsh Government's got something going on at the moment. So, yeah, I think so.
Great. We'll move on. Jenny, your thoughts?
Funny, we found initially there was quite a good uptake on some of the Zoom activities, and that climbed a bit. I think people got zoomed out very quickly, and it's about acknowledging that that's okay too. We found the telephone was actually a really important communication. Also, things like WhatsApp that we hadn't used for calls before. Now, we found it, one of our social prescribers was speaking to an older lady one day for over an hour, trying to set up Zoom on her tablet. And eventually it was that she just simply went to the house with social distance, cleaned down the machine and actually set it up. So sometimes it's just, you know, it's too difficult to, certainly the IT guys that deal with me, eventually they just come down and do it. So sometimes it's, you know, we need to actually step in physically to make the remote possible. But the telephone has been very useful, we found. You know, maybe remote's not for everybody, and that's okay too, that we don't, you know, that we don't make it mandatory, I suppose.
Yeah. Thanks, Jenny. Chris?
I think I touched on it a little bit in my presentation, but I think where community businesses were trying to keep in touch with their local residents, you know, whilst obviously WhatsApp groups and online ordering forms were implemented where they possibly could, in some places you couldn't really replicate the brilliance of services like the Good Neighbour schemes, or in areas where they exist, the village and community agents, which the ACRE network obviously sort of operate. And I think, you know, having people involved is going to be intrinsic for rural service provision for the foreseeable, and regardless of the kind of move towards online, and there probably will be an increased provision and more online over the coming years. The fact is, as long as we can still tap into a kind of wonderful network of individuals that are willing to actually support people that live in their community, I think that's what we should be trying to promote and celebrate, and definitely more so, this is now a great backdrop for that to be highlighted.
Thanks, Chris. Dougie? Oh, you're on mute. Dougie, you're on mute.
Sorry. I did press it. I think one of the challenges is that we need to see digital access as a fourth utility, and that's me saying I get my broadband via radio here, so we don't have through the normal way. So that's one of the things that we need to do. What we find, we have a project called Let's Get Digital Berwickshire, and we've got a few partners online that are involved in that. What we find is that you can provide people with digital devices, but we also have to spend time helping people to use those devices. It's no point just handing them out and expecting people just to pick it up and go with it. We're spending a lot of time with people. We've got some brilliant digital champions from all across Berwickshire who are taking time to help people get online and to know how to use the devices properly. If we don't do that, then what we'll find is that people will take a device and they'll just put it in a drawer. So it's it's about giving them the right kind of device. It's about getting them connected up, but it's also about helping them to learn how to use that properly, so they can use it for all sorts of things they didn't know was possible.
Thanks, Dougie. And I think we've got time for one more question, and that's from Aidan. Some of our rural groups in Northern Ireland are largely made up of older volunteers and have told us they more or less have to shut up shop as they've been shielding. Now they're facing the dilemma of getting going again. Have you been seeing this happen in your communities? And if so, can you please share that? If I start, Dougie, we'll go the opposite way.
This goes back to the re-ablement question, doesn't it? It's about getting people involved. We had around about 180 of our tenants with shielding, and I think that the letters that were sent out around shielding and the updating, I think people got really quite confused and didn't really know what to do. And then there was people who were self-isolating as well, who they weren't officially shielding, but they felt vulnerable, so they self-isolated. And I think that taking process for some people to get back to that. So again, the more that the community can rally around, the more we know people, the more we can have those relationships, the more that we can, encourage and help people build up that confidence again to be able to do it. And I go back, Ruth, to the wonderful people in Berkshire and the volunteers that have stepped up. They will do that again to enable people. And I think, and I'll repeat the point I made earlier, that one of the few highlights of the pandemic has been the relationships and knowing people better and connecting with people that we didn't really know that well before, but we now know them. And therefore that bodes well to be able to encourage that re-emergence after lockdown and get people involved again, albeit we don't know what the future is going to look like. And I agree with what Margaret said earlier, it will be a different place and we will do things differently. But relationships and the way that can develop, that won't change.
I think that's such a great way to sum up. But if anybody else does want to add their thoughts to that question before I do sum up, if Chris or Jenny or Margaret, have you got anything further to add?
Just to say that our experience of that was the local group in Plunkett who found themselves exactly in that situation, have come to us and asked if we can merge. But it is one of those, it's always been an issue, as in, the age of volunteers and availability of volunteers. The pandemic only highlighted that, didn't it? We were very fortunate. A lot of people who were furloughed from their work came in and did take over those roles, and then have morphed back into their work as they've gone on. I wouldn't claim to know what the permanent answer is, but it's certainly the pandemic has made that one of those questions again that's been highlighted, hasn't it?
Yeah, Chris, you want to come in?
I was just going to very quickly follow on, because the furlough point is spot on in terms of the number of community businesses seeing that, but also the younger generation stepping up to help out. But I think the key consideration that we've seen within the community business network, from, as I say, shops, woodlands, pubs, range of enterprises, is not been trying to replace like-for-like positions. So if people are shielding and not able to perform that volunteer position, you don't need someone to come and doing exactly the same. It might be compartmentalizing, breaking down, making smaller tasks, and making it a more flexible role that hopefully fits around people's other circumstances, whatever they may well be able to be. And so I think in terms of, as we move forward, it'll be that constant review about what can people donate and how can we best use that time, rather than saying we need a volunteer to do this in future.
And Jenny, would you like to say anything in reflection to that?
I just put the note on there. Children from our summer screen graduate, so we actually encourage volunteering from a very young age, Ruth. So instead of delivering services to young people, they deliver the services themselves. So we really grow our volunteers, and that's very much part of the culture. So, you know,
fantastic.
yeah.
Dougie, this will be the last comment. So, yeah.
I just want to, thank you. I just want to squeeze in the importance of community transport, Ruth, in rural areas. I think it's a vital lifeline for people, and I know that one of the things that will help people to get moving again, to get confident again, is the ability to call on community transport for that level of mobility. We've got people who live in very remote areas. There is no bus link. There is no other way of getting anywhere. So it's vital that services are supported through community transport. Our befriending service wouldn't exist without it. So we're very grateful to Babs for providing that. And we know that there needs to be more done across the to be able to. So I have to make that point. Thank you.
No, I'm glad you've made that point, and I'll have to draw the discussion there to an end. So this leaves me to thank panel members, thank you, and everyone who's participated. We had up to 120 on at one point, so without you making the time, we wouldn't have had the discussion we've had. So thank you for joining us. I think we've heard some really great examples here and brilliant work that's been undertaken by the panel members. And to me, I think you've demonstrated the unique challenges that face rural communities, but also the opportunities and how you've overcome these to adapt your services and just to keep those most isolated people supported. I think it's remarkable. To me also, I think what we've heard through Chris's examples is how these new social connections have been formed between rural businesses and these new partners that are working with charities and volunteers. And we have, as the National Lottery Community Fund, seen the demographics of volunteers moving to become a younger generation, which is really encouraging. So it just leads me to say that everything you've heard today will be shared and captured in a blog. This is one in many series of policy events that we're doing, and you can check out our website for further information. Please do so. We'll be taking this learning today to continue to support us as we support the communities that we fund. So we're really about rebuilding stronger, more resilient communities post-pandemic. So just once again, thank you, Chris, Margaret, Jenny, Dougie, and Donna. Your energy and talents and commitments, are making a huge difference, and are wonderful examples in my mind of how money raised by National Lottery players is making a big difference to rural communities across the UK. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.